The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
We're going to dive into our topic for the day, which is IT software demos. And in terms of what we're going to cover, here's the agenda. We'll start out with a basic definition, make sure we are all on the same page of what we're covering here. After that, we're going to discuss the three main types of software demos. We're going to be painting in broad brushes here. So these are the main types. Of course, there's a spectrum that you can operate within. We'll cover the main types, pros and cons of each. That's what we'll summarize after we go through them. And then after that, we'll give you some tips for success and how to approach your next software demonstrations for the best outcomes that you can get. So kicking it off with what are software demos? Simply put, this is the evaluation of the software product itself. So looking at the product, not the cost or surrounding proposal or the implementation. It's really looking at the product. Is it the right fit for what it is that you're going out to procure? When it comes to an RFP process for a software product, typically your evaluation process is consisting of these four major buckets, maybe a few other items, but the general proposal from the competing software firms, which might include their approach, implementation, background references, the typical proposal items. Of course, the pricing side is going to be in there. Then the demos, right? Looking exclusively at that system and product. And then don't forget interviews with their team as well. We'll cover that here and why that's important not to overlook. But that's the general idea. So as part of your evaluation process, looking at the major competitors, typically demonstrations are one major part of that evaluation process. That's what we're talking about here. When you look at the CPE structure for an RFP, so our 7 sections of a typical RFP, really where you're publishing the demonstration items is in the section 4 with your evaluation procedures, which is, here's our expectations for the demos. Here's how we're going to structure them. Here's how we're going to evaluate them. And how is it going to factor in to our overall selection and award process? So that's what we mean by demos. You've essentially set them up and told the industry, software providers and suppliers, we're going to do a demonstration as part of our evaluation process. Here's roughly how it's going to go. Publish that in the RFP. Of course, you can specify further later once you get to that stage. Oftentimes there's a short list heading into the demos, all that good stuff. But that's our demo basics. Here's the 3 main types that we see the most of. And again, these are painting with a broad brush. This is major types, and there's usually a bit of combination going on in any individual setup. So I'm going to give you the 3 main areas we kind of plant our flags, and most folks operate somewhere within these 3. The first one I'm going to loosely name a traditional software demonstration. What we see the most of, if everyone's just kind of left to their own devices, this is what you'll see the most of. We use this picture because this is essentially an open-ended type of demo. This individual here is on the vendor team. He's presenting the demo, and usually, jokingly internally, here's what I refer to the software demonstration folks from the vendor community. If we leave the vendors to their own devices, they will send you a professional demonstration artist, essentially, is what we call them. They are slick, snazzy. It's the razzle dazzle show. Oftentimes, believe it or not, vendors will have full-time dedicated staff internal to their company that all they do is go around to potential clients and demo their products. And it is pretty darn spiffy. Victor, I see in the chat, it's a dog and pony show. That, if left to their own devices, I'm repeating that phrase one more time, if left to their own devices, vendors do want to send you what they've found to be their best dog and pony show that they have found gets people excited about their product, bamboozles you, razzle dazzle, and wow, you leave that session wowed. Now it's because they've got a professional artist essentially presenting this to you. It's a performance. And yes, i.e., this is not the team you're working with. This is just a professional whose job it is to professionally wow you about the product. So that's the traditional thing. Now, the way this goes, yeah, this gets thrown in there as well. Yeah, I saw this was a picture. You just Google software demos. Here's one. Don't be surprised that they bring some goodies, some other things, right? Things that are not exactly about the product itself, but yeah, things like that. So wrong, but so traditional, so normal. When it comes to these traditional demos, essentially what this is if we as a client say, yeah, we want to demo your product, but we're not exactly sure how to set that up specifically, tell you what, here's an open time slot, vendors, suppliers, come on in, here's the date, here's the time, here's the how much time you have, it's an hour, it's 2 hours, it's half a day, whatever we decide. And then please demo your system, show us why and how it's the best fit for us. So we're kind of assuming they're going to look at our statement of work and requirements and tailor the demo to that a little bit, and they will. They're good at presenting this type of stuff, so they'll do some of that. But essentially, we're leaving it open to their dog and pony show. It's pretty easy for us though on the client side because there's very little planning we have to do, and there's almost no pushback we're going to get. We say, hey, we've published our statement of work, our scope, our requirements. Come on in. You have an hour to wow us, and we're looking forward to see what you bring. It's pretty open-ended, and the vendors like that. They want to do it the way that they've razzle-dazzled folks in the past. We've talked about it being run by what I call a professional demo artist, not someone you're actually going to work with. Also may not have any technical expertise of the product itself. So something we've also encountered a lot of is these professional demo artists might be more of the smooth talker, salesy variety, rather than what you would expect, which logically we would expect maybe this is somebody who had been in the trenches of implementation and customer support for a long time, and now they've switched roles to more of a sales and maybe more of an executive helping out type of role. But oftentimes it's just someone who's a smooth talker who can click through the version of the system they're showing you, not necessarily someone who has the technical background. It's kind of 50-50 is what we've excuse me, is what we've seen. And the other big thing to be aware of is when you go into this type of a demo, usually you are not seeing the actual system you're buying. It's usually some type of demo system or products that they can rely on that they're showing you. It may not be the real deal, in other words. So keep that in mind. That's part of the challenge we're going to discuss here today. So that's kind of traditional, open-ended, come on in, show us what you got. That's the traditional, way to do things. The next approach that we're going to talk about is what I've referred to more of as a scripted setup. It's kind of more like you're setting up your shopping list of all the things you want to see that product do. You're a little bit more prescriptive in the sense that you're like, yeah, this is what we want to see in the demo. You're providing a little bit more stringent guidance. Typically, the way this works is you've published some type of itemized requirements or detailed requirements in your RFP, embedded within your statement of work. And oftentimes what the client groups will do is they'll kind of sift through those itemized requirements and say, you know what, here's the key ones that we want to see. You kind of highlight them. You're like, these are the ones we absolutely want to see in the demo. You select them, you publish that list to the vendor community, and it basically is a shopping list to them, right? It's here's what we want to see in the demo, cover all these things. So there's a little bit more planning involved here on the client's internal side in the sense that you specifically go through and say, we want to see these items. Now, you're not always closing things off to the vendors. I see a lot of this where we'll say, in any given hour of demo time, maybe 45 minutes is going through this list. And we still give the vendors maybe 15 minutes of dog and pony show to show us whatever else is really cool about their product. So a lot of times it's a little bit of a mixture. And we provide that list to them in advance. Still, you're oftentimes going to see that professional demo artist conducting this type of a review. So they're coming in, they're just following your script a little bit more explicitly than in a more of an open-ended time period. There's some pros and cons to this. I'll cover that here shortly, but just covering the basic definitions here. That's what we mean by more of a scripted demo up front. Then the third is what we call more of a software verification rather than a demonstration. And in all its glory, basically what this would be is you're requiring the vendors to show you an existing product that's currently in use. So don't bring us the demo system. I want to see the real deal that's functioning at a current client right now, not a sandbox system, not a demo system. You require that the vendors coordinate with a similar client who's currently using that product. So you're saying specific product and version to what they're selling you, or as close as they possibly can get, and disclose to you that it's not the exact same thing. That's ultimately what you're going for here. And then ideally, what we found to be most successful is that the vendor themselves does not run this demo. You actually have a peer at that other organization who walks through your scripts. You still have a script here similar to that previous, number 2 type of demo. But you walk through that with a peer at another organization. They pull up their system. You say, hey, how do I create a new account? How do we process this? How do we perform that function? How do I add this? And they can show you real time in their system. So that's more of a verification. The reason we use the term verification is to send that message that it's not just a traditional demo. We're seeing the real deal and verifying that it works how we would like. A quick example of where we've done this before. This was for a statewide DMV automation, big project, about 70 million bucks. And then here's all the demos that came through. So one thing I'm going to mention to you is if you do a verification, you have to be prepared for pushback. The vendor community will not want to do this. That's just the flat out truth. They won't want to do this. They want to do it one of the other ways. And you'll have to be prepared for that. So a lot of times client groups will say, yeah, this verification thing sounds really good. Let's publish it in our RFP. And then they get some pushback from the vendors as the procurement process is moving along. And we cave to that pressure and we actually revert back to one of those other types of demos rather than sticking to our guns. If you stick to your guns, however, you have to be prepared. The vendors are not all going to follow the rules here. That's just how it's going to be. I'll give you an example. So mention that $70 million statewide DMV automation system. We went through demos. Here's the different demos that came through for these verifications, I should say. First up, that vendor, very disorganized. They jumped around. At the end, we weren't even sure that they covered everything that we had asked for in the script and actually had to spend the last few minutes together saying, hey, did you cover everything? As disorganized and confusing. Number 2, that vendor couldn't accomplish everything within the specified time limit. And at the end, they stated to us, well, hey, it'd be impossible for any company to actually get through your script in that time period. So big warning sign, right? They didn't tell us till after they attempted it. Tells us that if we award the project to them, we're not going to find out that they're late till they're already late. We're not going to find out that something went wrong till it already went wrong. Flashing warning signs going through that type of verification with them. So we're learning something here, even though it wasn't exactly how we liked it to be. I'm skipping out of order here. There we go. Number 3, they brought in a PowerPoint to show parts of the requirements because they didn't actually have the system who could do it. Very revealing. Number 4, failed to show an in-operation system, showed their prototype, showed their demo system. And then number 5, they had an end client actually go through and do it. So much closer to the intent, but basically the vendor had pre-scripted what that client was allowed to say and not say. So a little better, but there's some of that rigidity there. And then number 6, that vendor actually flew in one of their clients. They logged in remotely to their system, walked through the script and requirements one by one, accomplished it within the time limit, easy peasy, got to see the whole thing. So those are the 3 main buckets. And of course, there's combinations of these 3 types of demos that you can see. But that's kind of the main areas of where we'll see folks pursue their software demo structures. In terms of summary of pros and cons, if you go back to the traditional demo, some of the advantages of it is there's very little planning you have to do. It's kind of like, hey, we just do some logistics. If here's the dates, here's the time slots, ask the vendors to come in and show us their thing. They're not going to push back on us. Presumably, we're seeing the strengths of their system that they're highlighting in the Razzle Dazzle show. Some of the cons, though, is that it's pretty open-ended in the sense that you may not get apples to apples type of information in those demos. They're showing you their particular show, so to speak. They're only showing what they want to show you. It's probably run by a professional demo artist, and most of the time it's not the real system. And if you think I'm being cynical, you're probably right. We've done a lot of software demos, but this is what we've unfortunately seen a lot of over the years. On the scripted side, also fairly easy to plan, right? You go through your requirements that you've already gathered, you build that into a script. Vendors are pretty used to it. It's not that abnormal for them, so you're not going to get too much pushback. I do see some vendors will kind of complain and say, hey, as a con, then when we're doing it this way, it feels like the demo is more of a checklist where we're reading through this list of requirements and saying, yep, saw it. And sometimes that can detract from the evaluators being able to see the system in terms of how it functions, more workflow, more business process, more scenario of how you really use it in real life rather than just doing a checklist. So some vendors will say, hey, this isn't the best way to run it because of that, but that's kind of part of it. And then third, of course, with our verification, you get to see really what's on your shopping list still, but it's with a real working system. Simultaneously, you're basically getting a reference check. If you're doing this with a real operating system where you have a peer going through things, it minimizes that demo artist risk, but you are going to get much more likely vendor pushback. It is some more increased coordination to make that happen. So as all things in life, doing things a different way will require some effort and some resistance as well. So that's kind of the basics. In terms of tips for success here, some other challenges that we've seen with demos. You've probably recognized some of this. Vendors in the IT sector really try to build pre-RFP relationships with the folks that they think are going to be on the evaluation team. It's not uncommon for us to be in the middle of an RFP and find out that evaluators have already seen that system be demoed somewhere else, whether it was at a conference, whether it was at some other private showing. They've actually already seen some of this. They've actually been demoed before as outside of the RFP process. You'll also get an increased risk of evaluators doing their own research in these demos, right? Going to vendor websites, trying to see what's there, see what videos are already populated there to get some extra information. The challenge with both of these bullet points, of course, is that we are now saying that there's a risk of our evaluators bringing in extra information outside of the proposal process to inform their decision, which is major red flag territory. So got to watch out for that. Definitely the challenge of vendors pushing back against how we've set up our demo and what requirements. And of course, there's 4 scenarios that we could get into from that. If you want to do more of that verification side of things, which I think we would all agree is going to help you see the more realistic system that's in operation and is specific to reality. The challenge though in doing that is the pushback. And so you have to pre-educate the vendors multiple times. It's worth it. It's usually multiple pre-proposal sessions with the vendor community to get to that point, help them understand. You have to keep it short. Can't expect a ton from a peer group to devote an entire day to go through this, free of charge, so to speak. Everyone's usually pretty happy to provide a reference, but you start making it onerous on them and it's going to decrease participation. So keep it short. We like to say an hour, maybe an hour and a half maximum. Also, don't forget, do your interviews in parallel. Make sure you're interviewing that implementation team so you know who's going to be assigned to you. You have to keep your RFP process very streamlined and be confident that you're going to maintain your schedule so that you can actually make that happen. The vendors will push back here as well. We can't assign you an implementation team until after we're selected or even until after the contract is signed, is the most common pushback you get. So if you're going to go forward with this and say, no, this is our expectation, you do have to give a little bit as a client and say, well, here's how fast I'm going to be. Here's how I'm going to stick to my schedule. And if we don't, then yeah, we'll have a conversation about if those folks can still be held for us. That's all fair and square. And you have to really explain that to the vendors. We can talk about that in the chat, so what we mean with that. The other thing to remind you on conducting those interviews in parallel, don't just put all your eggs in the demonstration or verification bucket, right? Some of you have participated in our statement of work exercise where we go and do car dealership shopping lists, essentially. Imagine, right, that you're, in this case for IT software, you're purchasing both the vehicle, the products, the software system, for purchasing that, but also a driver, someone to implement it, someone to get you there, so to speak. So you might do a great demo and find out that you've got a totally sweet ride here, great product, but then who's implementing it? Who's helping you set it up? Who's coordinating it into your environment? That's a whole nother side of it. And if you get the wrong folks, then you're going to be in for some challenges on that side of the implementation, no matter how spiffy that product was. So do the interviews in parallel. Don't forget that there's, yes, demos, but also the interviews. Make sure you get the right driver. It's all set up here. What we typically recommend is you do specify the key 3 to 5 people on the vendor's team who are going to be related to that implementation, related to that deployment, a project manager, solution architect, business analyst, maybe data integration lead, sometimes other specific subject matter expert areas that are tailored to that specific solution that you're looking at. They might be a make or break person on the team, so don't overlook them. And that's basically it in terms of our summary. So hopefully that is helpful to see different types of demos, kind of the ballpark you can be playing within. You got the summary here of different pros and cons. Hopefully those tips will help out as well.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.